You're watching Breakthrough News.
I'm Charlotte Thun-Hohenstein, and you're watching Breakthrough News on BTR Today. Today, we're talking about how the internet and technological progress is revolutionizing the legal industry and helping bring legal services to small businesses. With me to discuss this is Basha Rubin, founder and CEO of PrioriLegal, an online platform that connects small businesses to lawyers for reduced rates, and Ada Birnir, founder and CEO of Skill Crush, an online company to help people improve their digital literacy and also their job prospects. So Basha, you are a trained lawyer. You went to Yale Law. I feel like for anyone who is not within the law industry, law is just such a headache. That just kind of conjures up immediate images of paperwork and huge expenses. It feels kind of impenetrable to someone on the outside. So, I mean, do you think does legal advice often get forgotten by small businesses when someone's starting up a business? Does it often fall by the wayside?
Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons that Mira Levitt and I founded Priori, because we wanted to make law something that wasn't stressful, that was easily accessible, whose fees were transparent, and give small businesses access to high-quality lawyers quickly. And because people have had such bad experiences and it conjures up such bad images, as you say, people avoid it, which often incurs much greater costs down the road when they haven't put together an operating agreement or a partnership agreement or filed for a trademark, and the cost to remedy those problems down the road is much greater than it would have been to handle it up front.
Ada, so you set up Skill Crush. When you were starting this business, was the prospect of dealing with the legal side of things very daunting to you? How did you approach this whole issue?
Yeah, so Skill Crush is not the first business I have set up. So by the time I got to Skill Crush, I had sort of learned lessons the hard way that Bosch is talking about. But I can tell you, I mean, it was overwhelming, the cost of it, honestly. We had to create a C Corp because we were looking to take investment at the time. And it's expensive. I mean, it was expensive. I mean, and complicated and hard to understand. And even for me at that point, having incorporated other businesses, it was still a challenge, and it really took the bulk of our startup capital at the time. So it's just to say that it is legitimately difficult, at least certainly as it is now.
Basha, what do you think of the online resources that exist to help people try to deal with the legal side of business on their own, like LegalZoom and other sort of DIY document sites? Do you advocate them, or do you think that you really need a hired lawyer from the very beginning to help you out?
I think DIY services can be right for the right type of person, a small percentage of the time for a small percentage of legal needs, but there's no replacement for the advice of a real lawyer. Documents are great, but if you don't know how to fill them out, they're ultimately not going to do very much for you down the road. And we often talk to lawyers about working in conjunction with some of the document services that are available online, so they can really do the high-level processing with the client, and the client can come and say, I'm setting up a new business, I'm thinking about taking investment, and I have these partners, this is my situation, and the lawyer can help them evaluate what the right corporate form is for them. And then if they want to, they can even go and set it up on their own or do the filing on their own in order to save money. But that sort of consultation with a lawyer, I really don't believe you can get with any sort of DIY document or static resource.
And that consultation aspect is unbelievably valuable. I mean, I can't even tell you how much I've learned. And you have to understand that, when you go into business, you're making sort of a legal agreement with your customer, whether you realize that you're doing it or not. Like a big learning point for me was the sort of importance of having a terms of service and a privacy policy on a website that's consumer facing. And I had, a friend who was like, oh, just copy somebody else's. And I was like, it doesn't sound like a good idea. And what I came to really understand is that you really don't want to do that, because other businesses are promising things that you maybe can't promise. And sort of understanding the implicit promises that you're making when you go into business, I think is really important for a business owner, and understanding sort of the ramifications of your actions that you might not be aware of.
So Ada, you will say wholeheartedly that the and sizable proportion that you spent upfront on legal fees was absolutely worth it? Well, I mean, and that you learned the hard way. What did you avoid? What problems did you avoid the second time round with Skill Crush that you encountered the first time?
So the first time I was running a web design and development business, and I did actually copy a contract. And you have to remember that these things only get tested sort of in very heated, tense situations, right? So it's like it's never like a good thing when you're having to like open up your contract and try to understand what it is you promised. And so it's always a tense situation, and so the better sort of prepared you are. But literally what happened in my first company was that somebody came back to me, and there was this dispute about who owned the intellectual property of some work that had been done, and I honestly didn't know based on the contract that I had copied and pasted from somebody else, and it was a really tense issue. And that was sort of my learning. And then in terms of Skill Crush, we spent a lot of time doing sort of ownership documentation, and I'm really thankful for that because I actually had a co-founder who left. And co-founder divorces are really, really common. They're a really common way that startups go under, honestly. It's something that a lot of people don't talk about, but it's a huge cause of business failure. And if I hadn't had those documents, I wouldn't still be in business.
Wow. Well, we're going to take a quick break for an excerpt from this week's episode of Serious Business featuring Big Ups. We'll be right back. And we're back with Barsha and Ruben. Barsha, how is tech and the internet changing the legal world altogether? Because on the one hand, it seems like it brings a lot of benefits. PrioriLegal is a resource that presumably would not exist, at least in the way that it does, as an online platform. But then probably it can be very overwhelming to go online and search. I mean, New York, I saw on your website, actually has nearly 164,000 practicing lawyers in the state, which seems totally overwhelming. So how is it changing the legal world?
Well, it's changing the legal world dramatically and on so many different fronts. In terms of how businesses search for lawyers, which is one of the primary problems that we're addressing, for a long time it continued to be overwhelming. Lawyers would have individual sites, everything was fragmented, and there are lots of sort of yellow page-esque directory listings. And what we're trying to do is curate that for small businesses. So we vet lawyers up front. We have a rigorous application process in order to become a priori lawyer involving, sort of a job application online, an in-person interview, and reference checks. We ultimately admit about 20% of the people who apply. And then when a client puts in a request, we handpick lawyers from our pre-vetted network who can help. And one of the things that we found very early on is that lots of small businesses, especially startups, are dealing with these issues for the very first time. They don't know the jargon. They don't know what type of lawyer they need. And that's one of the things that we can help with based on our experience. So hopefully it's the internet is providing resources like Priori that can help make sense of the wilderness and magnitude of the different options out there.
Right, because that's such a huge part of it, is finding a lawyer with very specific expertise to whatever business you're starting up. Ada, was that something that was crucial for you, finding a lawyer who understands tech and is digitally literate? Was it difficult to find someone like that, or that's what Priori did the job?
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, here's the thing, here's both the good and the bad about law, is that it can be done a million different ways, but that doesn't mean that there isn't sort of a best practices and a standardization of what people do who are sort of in the know. But we absolutely had a situation where we were interviewing different lawyers and getting 3 different ideas about what to do. And you're coming to the table with no expertise or very little expertise, and you're trying to make sense of it all. And I mean, not only is it hard to find any lawyer, it's hard to find a lawyer who practices your area and who's accessible to you, has expertise in whatever topic it is that you need them to have expertise on, and then who's also good. I mean, it's like an insurmountable obstacle, and you end up just kind of picking somebody who seems okay because you have to. And just any guidance is just like, I don't know, it's like a godsend.
So what kind of issues do online businesses face in general, companies that are entirely online? Are there sort of recurring issues that come up for these small businesses?
I think many of them are similar to the issues that traditional small businesses face. Setting up your founding documents, your investment, equity, debt, protecting your intellectual property, and, of course, some of the more specific issues Ada already brought up, your terms of service and your privacy policy, which Ada made the correct point, which is that copying someone else's is a huge mistake because you are creating a contract with all of your users, based on what's in it. And then, obviously there's sort of online defamation, privacy, security concerns, but online businesses face the same legal issues that all businesses face, and all businesses face a lot of recurring legal issues. But those issues, the cost of those issues, the magnitude of those issues can be minimized by smart legal advisors who function as any sort of business advisor on a regular basis.
Ada, what would you say is the best way for small businesses to think about law? Is it fair to say that it's essentially an insurance policy?
Absolutely. I mean, to a certain extent, you're making an investment in yourself, and you have to, you sort of start from nothing, and you're like, why am I going to pay, thousands of dollars for a lawyer to create a stock option plan for a company that's functionally worthless at this moment in time? It's just an idea and a hope and a prayer. But to a certain extent, I have come to believe that if you're going to have a big business, you have to really act like a big not act like a big business, but if you're going to be a professional, you really need to act like a professional and do the professional things, and that is an investment in yourself and a belief in the power of what you're creating. And obviously, I'm not saying that you should go spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal fees, which I'm sure you could if you wanted to.
People would be happy to take your money.
Yeah, but I do think it's worth protecting yourself and sort of acting as if your business does have at least a sizable amount of value when you start.
Basha, what's been the feedback from the corporate law community? Has it been positive or mixed or?
Very positive. There are obviously in every industry, especially probably professional services industries, people who don't want change, don't see change. But by and large, law, I think, was so shaken up by what happened in 2008 that everyone realizes that change is coming and that there's a need in this middle market.
Exactly.
I think that
I don't think that necessarily these are companies that big corporate firms were servicing. These are just companies that really weren't getting their services or their needs met.
Exactly. Or spending way too much time getting those needs met and getting them met inefficiently. There will always be people who are doing multi-billion-dollar merger and acquisition.
And they probably will not go on.
But, it's the middle 90% of the market that we're trying to serve. It's not the top, the highest, the biggest companies, the Fortune 500 companies, and it's not the indigent who, have their pretty good sort of legal services. It's everyone in between, people who are running a 20-person small business and find themselves with thousands of dollars of legal bills every year, and we help them spend that efficiently and wisely.
Yeah, and legal issues just come up constantly, with employment contracts and different issues that come up, and there's always nuances. I don't know. I mean, I literally, my lawyer is a really important business advisor at this point. He helps me make decisions about, sort of weighing costs and benefits of different business, actions. So.
Cool. Well, hopefully the worlds of law and tech can sort of catch up with each other and learn from each other. We're going to have to stop there. Thank you very much, Basha and Ada, for joining me today. To continue the conversation, share your thoughts with us on Twitter @Breakthrough News. We'll be right back in a moment after this quick excerpt from a special episode of Live Studio featuring Sloth Rust. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm Charlotte Thun-Hohenstein and this is Breakthrough News. Be sure to check out breakthroughradio.com through the weekend for our continued Rent Week coverage, including how being the scene of a murder affects the price of a home. That's it for what's breaking through the news today. Tell us what's breaking through your world on Twitter @Breakthrough News. I'm Charlotte Thun-Hohenstein and thank you for joining us.